Welcome to 40 years of the Cabot Executive-in-Residence. Huge! And we are going to be able to hear from Scott Cabot as we wrap things up today. But you have the program in front of you, and I am not going to go into long introductions because we really want to hear these people speak. But I want you to look at these bios, because these bios are incredible. And I'm joined by two absolutely phenomenal women leaders, Major General Marcia Anderson and Shelly Ibach. And Shelly is a graduate of Stout. She'll talk about that, I'm sure, during the conversation. And they just have remarkable career paths, experiences, knowledge, insights to share with us today. So please look at their accomplishments because they are really remarkable. So we're going to get into it because we want to hear from them. We want to hear advice that they have, experiences that they have. And this is going to be a conversation. So while I have questions, I have a feeling that things will sort of flow in whatever direction we take it. And then we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. So think of questions, please, as you're listening to the conversation, things you want to hear about, things you might want to know more about after reading their bios and listening to what they have to say. So we'll start with some more on the, I have things divided into two sets of questions. Personal and sort of professional, all leading into that sort of personal trajectory, but taking a different sort of angle on things. So let's start with one from the quote-unquote personal category. And the question is, who have been key role models for you as you've navigated your path to leadership, and why are these people role models for you? Shelly, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely honored to be here representing the 40-year anniversary of the Cabot Executive-in-Residence, and truly honored to be a UW-Stout grad of 1981. So, yay. Role models, starting with me. Well, first, role models and coaches and mentors are so important in your life, and I've had some really great ones. It starts with my parents. My parents were, phenomenal role models, instilling, incredible values. Values of integrity and passion, and a really strong work ethic. And that gave me the foundation to navigate my life. So early on, that's really where it all started for me. Then I had some, really incredible mentors and coaches and bosses along the way. And oftentimes I found that, the bosses became some great mentors. So, I hope that you find the opportunity to have great bosses. And, if it isn't a boss, seek mentors who, help you realize your potential. I also had 3 coaches throughout my career, executive coaches, and if you're ever faced with that opportunity to have a coach, seize the moment. The coaches gave me the ability to really understand and hone my strengths, and push me out of my comfort zone and help me, realize my potential. And then the mentors, and I had some incredible bosses. One here in college, he Anxious Jewelers I worked at, and he was a great boss who really taught me how to be a perfectionist. So there's that can go too far sometimes, but anyhow, he was great. And then the boss who really was a difference maker for me, a female. I thought I had reached my career aspiration back in 1995. I was a Dayton store manager, and that's all I wanted to be. And this new boss, came to fruition, and she saw my potential and helped me realize and understand it. And she pushed me, and she created opportunities for me, which I, was able to be very successful in. And my career really took off from that moment on. and then ultimately becoming the chair, CEO, and president of Sleep Number Corporation. And she actually works for me today. She's one of my vice presidents, and it's really a pretty wonderful story. So find those great mentors in your life, and they will make a difference for you. Let others drive your bus.
I'll have to say it kind of starts with my family as well. My parents divorced, so we live with my grandparents, my mother and my brother and I. And I'll have to say I was surrounded by strong women. This is back in the early 60s. And they both managed to live their lives in a way that was authentic, but also when they saw an opportunity to take the lead, they did. One example is my grandmother. I went to a Catholic grade school, and nobody stepped up to be the PTA president. Well, she was my grandma, and she said, well, I'll do it. And, lo and behold, she was an incredible leader. She had a vision for it. She helped them raise more money than they ever had before, and people were motivated and wanted to follow her. So that was an example to me of how to be a leader and how to bring people along with you and get them to buy into your vision and the mission. I'm a voracious reader. My husband, every time he sees me with my Kindle, he's like, well, another book? And I used to, before Kindles, have 3 or 4 books going at the same time around the house. But I really like biographies. And, I have a couple of favorites, but one of my most favorite is a biography by Doris Kearns Goodwin about Lincoln. I believe its title is Team of Rivals. And what I found fascinating about Abraham Lincoln is that he literally had a team of rivals in his cabinet. He had people who were opposed to him in terms of politics. He had, I think, someone who had run for office against him. But the value in that for him, and I took that, and I've used that in my career, is you need to have diverse and divergent points of view in the room when you're trying to solve a problem and make decisions. And it's not always comfortable, I'll admit that, and you may not always want to hear what they have to say, but the important thing is when you make that decision, you are doing it with as much information as possible. And so I find that very instructive. At lunch today, I mentioned someone, and you may not believe this, but I always admired Eleanor Roosevelt, because she wasn't the president, but she was a powerful force in the Roosevelt administration in terms of the things that she did. And so sometimes you may find yourself in that kind of situation. You're not the boss, but you are a follower, and you can be a courageous follower. You can be a very supportive follower, because that will also add value to the organization. And I'll have to echo everything Shelly just said about mentors. I didn't actually seek out mentors, they found me, but once we got together, I realized the real value, and I also made sure that it was a two-way relationship. As I mentioned to some people earlier today, when you're a mentee, it's not just about you receiving, you need to also give. And that means if your mentor has supported you and recommended you for something, you need to produce, because that will obviously make the mentor look good, but it's also a way for you to give back to them, that their faith in you was justified.
Thank you. So we're at a university, one that's familiar to both of you, right? You've been here before, or you've been a student here. What did your university experience sort of contribute to your career path and your philosophy of leadership?
I guess I'll go first this time. I went to Creighton University, which is a Jesuit institution in Omaha, Nebraska. So there was a long tradition of Jesuit teaching and philosophy there about what makes good leaders, what makes good citizens, and how to be a good student. And while I was there, and this is kind of my ROTC, my Army journey, back in the days, for the students in this room, there were no computers in 1976, 77. And so I needed a science credit at Creighton in order to complete my liberal arts degree. And I worked at night, so I couldn't take astronomy, which I really wanted to take, and I wasn't going to take biology because it might involve touching slimy things. So, so the only table where there was nobody in line to sign up was a table that said ROTC in kind of small letters, and then it said Military Science Department. And I was like, yeah, let's take a flyer here. And turns out it did count. I thought it was physical education because there were photos of people rappelling and jumping out a window, jumping out of airplanes and stuff. And I thought, oh, that looks like physical education. So anyway, I signed up. There was a stipend involved, and that kind of started me on my journey. And it also really informed the rest of my college education, because in addition to being a student and sitting in classes with my colleagues, I was a political science major. I was also taking leadership. Being involved in leadership classes, and the ROTC program gave me opportunities to lead small groups of people. And I'd been a very shy person up until that point and had never been on a team. So I learned about leadership, I learned about being a good teammate. And that is kind of how my journey began to where I am today. I wasn't always just in the Army. I did 36 years, but I also, as you know from my bio, ran a federal bankruptcy court. So, and I was able to use those things I learned in ROTC and in college throughout my career.
Well, as I stated before, I attended UW-Stout, and it was a pretty phenomenal experience for me. I joined as a first-generation college student, and I found Stout to be approachable and comfortable for me. It was an opportunity for me to not only attend classes, but work nearly full-time at Anschutz Jewelers and have this holistic experience. We had a store on campus called The Niche. I was in the fashion merchandising area. That's where I received my BS. And the Niche was a student-run store, and it's such a great example of 40 years ago applied learning, even back then at UW-Stout, and it has progressed so far since that time. But having that, applied learning, I always describe Stout as this combination of academic and practical experience, which really prepares you to be successful once you leave this environment and have participate in a more diverse environment. And it, for me, it prepared me well to be able to handle a lot of complexity all at once, a lot of different pressures and responsibilities. And, as Marcia stated, the teamwork element of it, so many examples of, different courses that I took where you had to work with a diverse set of individuals, where we all have different experiences and backgrounds, and we were able to build on each other's ideas and come up with the best solution and win together as a team. And teamwork is such an important value and part of our culture at Sleep Number, and I associate it all the way back to when I attended UW-Stout and had so many, collaborative projects, and it really taught me a lot about working with others and finding the best outcomes.
Thank you both. Personal advice or constructive feedback, let's call it, that you may have received during any point in your career or life that challenged or changed you?
Well, mine is a deeply personal one. I lost my husband of 34 years 7 years ago to leukemia, 7 years ago next week. And, it was, a fairly abrupt end where, things all of a sudden change from looking good to, having a few days. And it's not the outcome that we expected. And George was trying to prepare me to move forward, and he asked me to go back and read a passage that he had written in a journal 30 years earlier when he had lost somebody, and it was a saying written by Kubler-Ross, and it definitely changed me. And the saying was, you know, if in loss, if you lose somebody who you love very deeply, in order to move forward, you need to invest in life, and that's how you will bring meaning to that person's death. And it really struck me. And, you know, when you're faced with, you know, the worst thing that can happen to you, and have this sense of loss, you know, it's juxtaposed to invest so deeply into living. But it's exactly, you know, what I needed to hear and the kind of advice I needed. And to this day, since that time, I have started, you know, every morning with gratitude. That's how I start my day. Gratitude, which yields faith, which yields acceptance, and then I can move forward with curiosity, and I seek joy every single day. That's my mindset. And, you know, I, you know, really credit, you know, George and that passage to helping me, you know, move forward with and find graces, which is what grieving is about. And, you know, I seek joy every day, and I find it almost every single day. And it's an important mindset.
I just want to say thank you for sharing that with me and everybody else here. Thank you. When I was a student, I was what I guess you'd say pre-law, but they didn't really have a program like that at Creighton. But I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So there was a woman in my neighborhood who was our state legislator. She was an attorney. She had a law practice. She had 5 kids, and one was special needs. And I thought, lawyers can do anything. But, yeah, they can, maybe. But one semester when I was reviewing my grades with my assistant professor of military science, and I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I was obsessed with the idea that I had to have, you know, a 4.0, something very close to that to get into law school. And I'd gotten basically a C in a class that I deserved a C in, but I thought that was the end of the world. And I was in his office being mopey, and, you know, this is the end of my world. My life is over. I'm going to have to, you know, work at McDonald's. This isn't going to work out. And I was catastrophizing, as I still tend to do sometimes. And he said, look, he said, Marcia, in 10 or 15 years, no one is going to ask you what grades you got in, you know, History 101 or theology. What they're going to want to know is what you have done. They want to see that you've demonstrated that you're doing a good job, you know what you're doing, you're adding value. And that stuck with me throughout my entire career in life. I would think back to that moment when I realized it's about what you do, what you produce, not about some fancy credential. There are people with fancy credentials who are probably driving cabs or driving Ubers in New York City. The fact of the matter is, just because I didn't go to, you know, an Ivy League school didn't mean I wasn't going to be successful. And again, being at Creighton and not getting straight A's didn't mean I was going to be successful. It was all about putting in the hard work, having character and integrity, caring about and working with people, and as I say, doing the right thing by the people that I worked with and the people I worked for. And that was what was going to matter at the end of the day, not my C in art or anything else that I had gotten. Or for the people who were in the business department, I got a C- in accounting, which I deserved. So in any event, that's kind of how I did it.
Thank you both. Okay, so you're only allowed to name one thing that you're most proud of. It can be career related or otherwise. And what did it take to accomplish that?
I'll answer on behalf of my role as CEO and president of Sleep Number Corporation. The one thing I'm most proud of is our culture. We have a mission-driven culture where everyone is committed to our purpose of improving the health and well-being of society through higher quality sleep. It's a values-based culture, and the unity, the North Star that our purpose provides and the unity it brings. We're a culture of individuality and inclusion, and it truly allows you to, become the best person and the best leader that you can be. And that's what we all, aspire to and work to support one another to that outcome. And the culture, it's living, breathing, it's constantly moving, and everyone contributes to it. It's definitely what I'm most proud of.
I guess mine would have to be, there was an employee who worked for me at the United States courts when I was there, who I saw had enormous potential that I knew he did not see in himself. And I kind of made it a mission of mine to help him attain, the level I knew he was capable of. And to do that, I made sure that I encouraged him to volunteer for things that might be uncomfortable, and put him on a task force to accomplish some kind of a project. And slowly over time, he began to have more confidence in his abilities. And we had at least twice openings for supervisors, and he didn't apply, but I didn't push it. I wanted him to realize that he was, capable of doing this. And shortly before I retired, there was a final position that kind of opened up before I left, and he applied for it, and he was promoted. And since I've gone, I've gotten reports from people who were left behind who have told me that Ron has just flowered and developed. He's a great supervisor. People that work for him love him. He's very thoughtful. He's creative. He motivates people. And I'm so proud of that, because taking someone who doesn't see themselves in the way you do and helping them achieve a goal they didn't even have in mind, is something I really, really am very proud of.
And it speaks to being a great mentor, right? We opened with, that theme of mentors, and this is that reciprocity, right? Mm-hmm. Paying that forward. So as women in leadership roles, what has that journey been like for you? And do you think things have changed for women in such roles? And I know, because I'm looking out the audience, there's probably women who are aspiring to leadership roles. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I would say lean into adversity. Oftentimes I describe my life as a life of adversity. And, courage is my red thread. Courage is my defining characteristic, and it's, the characteristic that I really lean on whenever faced with adversity. To be your best self and to realize your potential, it's going to take courage. And you're going to be faced with adversity. Everyone will be in many different ways. And if you lean into it, you will get through it, and you will be on the other side. And I assure you, going through it, you will learn something that is of value. Even if, it's crappy adversity, you're still going to learn something that is going to be valuable for you to take with on the other side. If you don't lean into it, you're going to be stuck until you do. You got to get through it. So, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would especially put emphasis on for women, because sometimes we tend to, just hold back as a gender, and, lean in, be who you are, be confident in who you are, and understand what your characteristic is so that you can use it to lean on as a strength when you're faced with difficulty.
I agree with almost everything you said. From my perspective, I was in two professions where women were not initially treated the way they are today, with a high level of acceptance. I was an attorney, And if you all had time, I could talk to you about some experiences I had in courtrooms with judges when I first started to practice law, but also in the military, which was a largely, and still is, a male-dominated organization. So I didn't always feel welcome in rooms. And sometimes people flat out told me I wasn't welcome, that I was taking up space that a male should have. Believe it or not, doesn't happen today, but it did then. And I decided that, I wasn't a legacy person. So I didn't have anybody in my family who had been an officer in the military. My dad served in the Korean War, but he was like he was a very low-level airman. And so I didn't have the playbook. So I made sure that I educated myself. I learned as much as I could about my craft. I asked questions. I found the people who were the subject matter experts, which in most cases were not all other officers. They were sergeants who actually did the work. And I used that same tactic when I was working in any other place. I would ask the person who was actually doing the work, as opposed to some senior person who said, oh, I know how this works. Well, no, you're not doing it, so how do you really know? And the other thing in terms of what you were talking about is authenticity. People can spot a fake a mile away. So if you're going to be a leader, you need to be an authentic person. You really need to care about people. And then the last thing is integrity. Once you lose your integrity, you either don't ever get it back or it's very hard to build that trust with people. My very quick example is when I was at a conference and my job was to certify everyone's training vouchers, their expense submissions. And my boss had falsified his expense report. And someone who knew what was going to happen told me. Now this is the Army. I was junior to him. And I was taking a risk by telling someone who was his boss what had happened, because they could have thrown me under the bus. But I felt I would not be able to look at myself in the mirror the rest of my life if I let this slide. And as I mentioned about authenticity, people are always watching you. Subordinates are always watching you. They were watching to see what I was going to do. Those sergeants wanted to know if I was going to do this. And I did. I turned him in. Unfortunately, that meant I was the acting, and I had his job after that by default. But the matter here is, though, that integrity is so important, and doing the right thing, even when it's hard. You will love yourself more if you do that, because otherwise you're going to regret it the rest of your life.
Thank you. So thinking about that sort of professional context and leading those organizations or areas that you have led, what have been the major disruptors of success of those organizations?
Well, gosh, where do we begin? External disruptors have been, the major disruptors for us. Yeah, I've been CEO for 12 and a half years with my company. And, well, I'm going to answer it in two ways. One, the role we played as a disruptor, and then two, how we've been disrupted. So I'll start with the role we've played as a disruptor. When I took the seat in 2012, we, really created an ambitious vision to become one of the world's most beloved brands by delivering unparalleled sleep experiences. And, we had this very rational brand with, a 1-800 infomercial, mattress. Yep, it was innovative. It was clinically proven to improve back pain. But it, lived in the commodity mattress industry. And we wanted to be more broadly relevant and, reach everybody with this incredible, bed that, celebrated individuality and provided individualized support and comfort on both sides. And we, believed in the future. This was, 12 years ago. We believed in the future of connected home and connected health. And we, saw around the corner to be able to incorporate the technology into our bed and create what we would call a smart bed. So we went on to acquire a few different technology startups, including hands-free monitoring device company and incorporated that into our bed and transformed the entire company to produce smart beds. We introduced the first smart bed in the world in 2014, and in 2018 we transitioned to all smart beds. And today we have improved more than or nearly 16 million lives. We have over 3 million connected smart sleepers. We have 29 billion data points of extremely valuable longitudinal data. And, you know, in many ways, we're just getting started because the bed has so much capability for the future with digital health. And so we disrupted this $20 million commoditized mattress industry with the idea that no bed should be dumb. You know, all beds, and I do believe that all beds will be smart someday. And our beds are proven to deliver higher quality sleep, which, you know, ties directly back to our purpose. And so, you know, disrupting and becoming the disruptor is really important as an innovation leader. And that's our position in the industry, is to be the innovation leader and continue to set pace and deliver value to consumers that move society forward in a meaningful way. Then, being disrupted, I have to talk about the last 5 years. Starting with the pandemic, you know, we had transitioned to all smart beds, driving double-digit increases every single quarter, you know, for, you know, 6-7 quarters in a row, and then the pandemic. We have 650 of our own stores, and of course, you know, they all closed in a moment with the onset of the pandemic. We came out of that and came through that to be met with the semiconductor chip challenge, and you remember that was, you know, a global challenge that affected only us in our industry because we're the only ones with smart beds. 18 months of that, and by that time, you know, the consumer sentiment had, you know, went to an all-time low with the onset of the war in Ukraine, and has remained there, along with the lowest purchasing power and, you know, just a, you know, real tremendous pressure in the housing industry. So our industry has been in a recession for nearly 4 years. And it's the biggest recession our industry has ever faced, and it's what's called a sector recession. Not all industries are in recession right now, but ours is. So we've navigated a lot. And this goes back to perseverance and agility and, you know, clarity and all the things you need to be able to navigate, you know, constant external disruption. And that's really the era we're in now. You know, we're in a time of global disruption, and you have to be able to have, and now leading through a operating model transformation to give us greater financial flexibility, because you have to be more nimble in all aspects of your business to be able to, you know, lead through unexpected macro disruption.
Well, I'll take the government side of this discussion in terms of disruption, because I worked for, obviously, the federal courts, which is a branch of our government, as well as the military. And disruptors for those two organizations is being agile and flexible and adapting more rapidly to changes in technology and applying that technology to make ourselves more efficient and more effective. And anybody in this room, particularly staff and faculty, know that government agencies are not necessarily agile and flexible and adaptable, but sometimes necessity is going to drive that. In order to be successful, in order, for example, in the court system, to manage cases in a more effective way, and the reams and reams of paper that we used to have to manage, and turning that into electronic case management. That was a huge change and a huge disruptor. I had staff members who were threatening to quit when I said they were going to have a computer instead of a typewriter. That's just how crazy it was. And then adapting your military to the world that's changing so rapidly, and how we protect this nation and execute our government's missions abroad. We have to be adaptable. We are super high technology, but during the war, We were, in many cases, on our back feet because our adversaries were using pretty simple and basic, homegrown, homemade in their kitchen technology and weapons. And so that for us, in a sense, it wasn't technology, it was people who were looking at all the technology we had and finding the holes. And so we had to learn how to quickly close those and respond. So the use of technology, and also recognizing when you've become to over-rely on technology and someone can defeat you by using something very simple. So that's what I would say.
So I'm going to pause here and see if there's questions out there that you all have. I have more questions, but I hope you all have some questions as well. So any questions that people would like to pose? There's mics in the center of the room. And yes, you need to go to a mic so we can hear you. Questions?
Such a great time to lean in.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Mm-mm. Two brave souls.
I guess I'll ask one. I think you've kind of answered it, but sometimes we have mentors, we have role models we follow, but sometimes they don't always show you what the failures may be. And I like to think of looking for a Sherpa who can take you to the top, but knows how to take you down. Have you had any of that in your life where somebody showed you some of the failures you might have had, or did you have to endure them yourself?
It's a really good question. You know, I think back to a few of my mentors, and they helped me see around the corner. And, you know, I mentioned perceptual acuity earlier. As an innovator, it's, you know, absolutely essential. But it's also something that, you know, it's a skill. It's a skill that you learn. You know, you need to be skeptical. You need to look around the corner. You need to anticipate the unexpected so that you can be more responsive and agile. And so I would say that my mentors helped me do that and understand that skill. Maybe not telling me what they were, but putting it on my radar and helping me develop that perceptual acuity is how I would answer that.
I guess I would say I had a wonderful mentor who did this for me, and I later did it for people who worked for me. I was a deputy general counsel at a utility, and I was working on something, and I didn't quite get it right. And he told me, okay, look, we're going to talk about what you could improve, but he made sure that when he reported to the president of the company that he took responsibility for it. He wasn't going to blame me. And he later told me, he said, this is what you do, is you as a leader, if something doesn't go well, you take responsibility and go back to your staff or whoever, make sure that did you give them the right resources? Were you clear in your instructions and your vision and your intent? And then when things go well, you don't take credit. You give credit to your staff, the people who did the work. And so I took that to heart. And yes, there were times when I didn't quite get it right. And I would do a lot of introspection and thought. And if it was, again, someone I had given a job to or a project, I took the blame for it, and then I worked with them so they would be better next time, and that I would also be much, much better next time in terms of my direction and guidance.
I got a questions. First, I want to say thank you to Ms. Chancellor, Ms. Anderson, and Ms. Selby for this wonderful sharing. With some readers, I heard a lot about, grabs, like goals, visions, and professional executions. But I got a questions that for the majority of our business students, we come here and study business major, which is have a wide range of knowledge, but I think the major problems of us is that we haven't found our calling, which is our expert or professional field that we want to focusing on that and study. Do you have any advice on that on our students? And just want to ask for your calling. Thank you.
It's a really great question. My advice would be to take the pressure off yourself for finding that exact match. I'm unusual in the fact that from day one, my father owned a power sports store, and I learned about retail and have cherished, consumers and customers ever since. And so it's kind of been, really, really clear. But I think most people, move around and it's a process of discovery. I don't think you have to have that pressure of finding and knowing the perfect answer. Stay open-minded, stay curious, keep leaning in and placing yourself into different paths of opportunity. The answer will come to you. And, I think that's the, have faith, lean in, and make sure that you continue to stay really present and moving forward, and the answer will be there. We put so much pressure on ourselves in life, so I'm going to expand this to life, on, worrying about or, thinking about the future. I'm going to go back to my personal situation of, when I lost my husband. You feel like your whole future is gone because you've envisioned it a certain way. None of us really know what our futures hold. We have today. We have the day we are in. Be present for today, and don't worry about what happened in the past, and don't project about the future. Be fully present so you embrace this time and this moment, and the path will reveal itself.
I have nothing to add to that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for the question.
Hello, I had a question a little similar. Was being leaders, I can find it hard to be like, how do you find that motivation, that purpose? Like, when did you find that purpose where it's like, this is like what I know I am going to do?
Well, how I found it was in the person I mentioned earlier that was a lawyer, a legislator, a mom, a leader in our community. And the second thing is, and I'll disclose this, and I've disclosed this in other places, my primary motivation in life was when I was held back in kindergarten. I flunked kindergarten, absolutely. But that motivated me to prove the teacher, Mrs. Shawinski, I'll never forget her name. It's 1963, I still remember her name. But that really motivated me and drove me. So I worked really hard. I took advanced placement courses in high school, took additional courses in the summer and was able to matriculate as a sophomore. And then I finished college in 3 years. And then I went to law school. And then I've done other things. But that was my driving force, a moment in my life when someone labeled me, mislabeled me, made me, and I was determined to prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. And so there may be something in your life where someone has doubted your dream and told you, nah, maybe, you might want to do something else that's safer. But in your heart, if you know that this is what you want to do and you're willing to work hard and apply yourself, then you do it, you go for it, and you let that be your motivation. That's what worked for me.
For me, and this may sound, a bit corny, but it is really true. Like, I have always, since I was a little girl, I have wanted to bring joy and make people happy. And it's something inside of me, and I therefore, look for the good in individuals, and I try to shine light on it and try to bring that out in each person, because, we all have such incredible individuality and special gifts. And so often people don't realize, how much they have, how much goodness they have. And there's a lot of bad in the world that, kind of squashes that out of people. And, this courage red thread that I have has always enabled me to pull it out of myself. And so I don't know, it's a bit of a life mission of, making the world a kinder place through higher quality sleep, making the world a better place by helping people realize, their potential and their goodness. And that's kind of all wrapped up in leadership. And that's, kind of my raw core that probably speaks to, that inner drive.
Yeah, thank you.
In your last answer, you talked about being mislabeled. You've gone through life reading your bios. There's a lot of other labels that are, first this, first woman this, first. Through your career and also your career, where have you been mislabeled, poorly labeled, and how did you overcome those labels to get to the point where you are now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first, in terms of my legal career and competing in that workplace, labeled. I went to Rutgers Law School, which is a pretty darn good law school, but I was practicing in the New York, New Jersey area, where there were a lot of NYU, Columbia, and Ivy Leaguers. And when I was, in working or going into court or deposing a witness, and the room was full of people like that, I knew when I walked in I was labeled. In fact, once or twice I'd gone to a deposition, and they asked me if I was a court reporter. Yes, that happened more than once. Or in the military, where I wasn't a West Point graduate, I was a woman, and I was a person of color, and so the expectation and the bar was set pretty low. But I made sure I not only crossed over that bar, I exceeded it. And so over time, people began to come to me, the mentors that I mentioned, because they saw that when they gave me a job, I got it done. And I not only got it done, I got it done well. And so they began to have confidence in my abilities. And so just proving myself. People could label me, and sometimes I thought I used it to advantage. I knew when I walked in the room, they weren't expecting much, so I would just lay in wait like a cat and pounce.
I'll pick up on that note. I often say, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. I may be kind, but I am certainly not weak. And, many people can confuse that, and then they learn. The probably most striking time for me was when I lost my husband, and people found out that I was CEO of Sleep Number, and they assumed that it was my husband's business. And I mean, I can't even tell you, this happened like 20 plus times. They assumed it was my husband's business that I inherited, and therefore I'm the CEO of the company, and it's a public company. But I mean, everybody went there. If I went to the doctor, if I went anywhere, and people would ask me questions, that's the assumption that was made. It had to be from my late husband, or my what I have, financially had to be from the late husband. It could not have been my earning. So the other one is, actually, getting to this CEO role, as a UW-Stout graduate and not being a business school graduate, that was a barrier. And, when you're faced with those barriers or judgments, you need to continue to persevere. Perseverance is so incredibly important. and don't lose your footing. Don't let others define you through your life. Stay steady and continue to be your authentic self and lead with integrity and courage and keep leaning in, and you'll show a different path forward. One of the main reasons I wanted to be a CEO was to create a culture that really celebrated individuality, where you didn't have to be a certain way to be promoted. You needed to have great values and capabilities to be able to be promoted, but you didn't have to be like everybody else, because our differences are what really makes the world far more interesting.
And on that, please join me in thanking these two incredible women for being with us today. And as you can see, Scott Cabot is on his way up to the podium, and we have Scott to thank for bringing these two incredible women to Stout. So, Scott Cabot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, relax. They only said I could have 3 minutes. I've wanted to do this a long time. When I met with the planners to do the 40th anniversary, I was asked, what do you want to do? I said, I want to celebrate women in leadership. I said, who do you want to come here to do that? It took me about 5 seconds to figure out who I wanted back. Both of you came here before. When you were here before, I didn't want you to leave. I don't want you to leave now. And I hope you'll come back. This program has meant a lot to me. You've made it exceed my wildest dreams. It's been great, and we're not done. So until you return, and I hope you will return, we have a little token of our appreciation, a symbol. I'll ask Chancellor to help me with this. Okay. First, to Marcia, your kindergarten teacher was my 5th grade teacher. Okay, I had one of those, and believe me, we'll talk. Anyway. We want you to have this as a token of our appreciation. We hope you'll come back. And speaking for everyone, we thank you for your service and all of our brave women and men in the armed services who let me wake up this morning under a warm blanket of freedom. And Shelly, of course, we have a special connection, both being Stout graduates. We share the experience. We both know how special a place this is. Same thing, I didn't want you to leave. That warm blanket of freedom I slept under was on one of your beds. So. Yes, exactly. I mean, you're truly an example of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So again, we wish to have you this, Chancellor, if you'll present that. And again, we thank you for coming. With both these tremendous women, when I called them up, I said, would you come back? And there was no hesitation. They said, we'll be happy to come back. They were flattered to have been asked. And I'm honored that you have come here. So, thank you.
So thank you all for being here. Thank you for celebrating this with us today. Thank you for Scott, who has disappeared behind the curtain. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.